So welcome so much. If this is your first time, I'm Cynthia Lawson Jaramillo. I'm the director of the Deed Research Lab at Parsons School of Design in New York. Today is International Women's Day, and it's also Holi. So I wanted to say happy Holi. It marks the beginning of spring for many, though it's freezing in New York. Maybe it's warm where you are. And I'm delighted to have a special guest today in today's La Hora. Luca Alessandrini. Luca and I met last summer. We were both participating as faculty at a summer school in Aalto University in Helsinki. And on a bus ride, after leaving Alvar Aalto's beautiful home and studio, we engaged in a conversation about the terms and the politics of the terms artisan, designer, craft. Luca is a designer. He is now working on his PhD at Politecnico di Milano in Italy, focused on issues of sustainability, materiality, business, various models, etc. So I'm delighted that Luca can be here. I'm grateful for his flexibility. He was going to join us in the fall, but that was a session that we canceled. So thank you, Luca. Luca has prepared a slide deck, so he will be sharing his screen. And towards the end, we will have plenty of time for conversation and questions and answers, though feel free to write your comments and questions in the chat as we go along, and I can be monitoring that. And Luca, feel free to ignore the chat. I'll speak to you verbally if there are any issues on your end. So you can just walk us through what you prepared today. So thank you, Luca, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Also, I'll close the meeting chat window. Okay, I'll share my screen as well. And here we are. Well, again, thank you very much for having me, Cynthia. It's really nice and almost, I want to say incredible, but pretty nice to see what can come out from just a chat on a bus. So as well, as Cynthia already said, is really about, that's the title, let's say, of my presentation. Don't keep it, it's very simple, very, as I said to Cynthia in the beginning, very easygoing. So, and again, that's how I really would like to keep our time together as a conversation. So no, it's not going to be a one-way lesson, absolutely, or a one-way talk. Please feel free to intervene through the Q&A, or even maybe there will be the chance to also along the presentation. Again, must be a conversation. So apart my background, yeah, well, probably a few words about what I'm doing at the moment, what I'm up to, and probably also from about where I come from, which is which we will see. It's really about is in between industry and design and how it is becoming nowadays, especially in my in my homeland scenario, which is Italy. So at the moment, that's what I'm doing. So I'm a research candidate. I'm looking in between, like materials, industrial symbiosis, how to put together, and especially how to let's say foster the practice of designers into making materials, upcycling waste, and especially doing it through making companies to collaborate. So trying to be as much as quick as possible in the background part. So here is where the my research is situated. So in between industrial symbiosis, materials, again, upcycling, especially organic waste, and there's a lot to say, but I'm not going to go specifically through that. But in the end, I'm trying to, let's say, propose a methodology, which I'm not going to go through, but I'm just going to show you quickly what I'm doing. Going through quite a long case studies collection about practices of designers involving materials and organic waste. I'm going to skip this part. So I'm making my case studies myself, such as collecting them and longer, let's say, mapping activity on different territories. I mean, I'm calling you from Denmark at the moment, but this work started in Italy. So mapping companies, organic waste, to craft materials, again, and especially to craft everything within a methodology that can help, can facilitate this process. And we will see as one of the topics how the role of designers in changing this scenario. So also part of what I'm researching is about stays in between, let's say, it relates definitely about how designers are changing their roles. So from being industrial designers, being from that's what we saw in the beginning, how it's the role of designer started. So collaborating with companies in order to give support in designing, in again realizing products that were probably appealing for markets or just better working, and so on. Very wide range of possibilities. And again, please feel free to interrupt me, even to intervene if you don't agree or if you feel to add anything. That was not the most pleasant slide. Sorry, maybe we can go back to this. That being said, again, in terms of my research, in terms of methodology, proposing a methodology, it's really about how to see also now tackling as well the how the role of designers in changing nowadays. So from collaborating to companies to promoting upcycling practices with companies or through companies in this case. So keeping our presentation going is about the methodology. Talks about like how to map and how to, for example, develop materials. This is one of the case studies. This is a glazed material for ceramics developed by using waste from the glass industry on the left, and waste from the inorganic waste in this case from the let's say food industry, you can say, so shellfish mainly. Or another case studies which I developed. These nice transitions were not intended to happen, but it's still back to Italy. It's about like using aquafaba, which we all know nowadays. What is it? As a foaming agent for polymers, for example. Those are some of the samples I realized, also in collaboration with another couple of universities and companies too. Another case studies could be it's applied to, let's say, vegan leather, and using what is left from the winemaking processes. So that's another one. It's about, again, leather and making fillers for leathers from what comes from the olive. Olive pressing, very Italian case studies in the last two, definitely wine and olive oil, of course. And this is one of the material developed here in Denmark. They have very interesting waste. We talk about a lot of wool that is not really usable in the fiber market, so it just gets burned, and a lot of potato waste from the processing industry. And so again, I managed to work and develop some materials for packaging, also some for letters, and that's what I'm doing at the moment. But before to do this, and also before being a freelance designer for a few years, I grew up in a company making furniture in the very Italian way. So I was let's say, the designer and the product manager within a company that was making very Italian furniture in the style, but also in the way. So I was, let's say, dealing with the design side of these products from the inside. It's a company where I grew up. It was my family company. Nowadays, it doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. And those were the kind of products that were realized by these companies, and especially in Italy, where there is not a specific, let's say, a very clear, neat line between crafting, which we have long traditions, and in industry, which is very, very well, let's say, developed in Italy. It's supposed to be the 7th most industrialized country in the world. And also, especially doing my research, as I've been, as I showed before, that is really about mapping companies. I could see a huge difference between Italy and Denmark, for example. But anyway, within the world of industry, there are a lot of course, a lot of competencies, a lot of jobs, a lot of figures and people which are able to cover different, let's say, different competencies. And among them, we have, let's say, the of course, the industrial designers. So we all know about. I mean, I don't think I have to bring up any examples of what are the Italians designers do. What were the Italian designers doing, and some of the design theorems and all and how the design was, let's say, really entangled with companies in Italy, developing what is nowadays probably what are nowadays most of the classic design products that really did the history of design in terms of products, in terms of trends, and in terms of nowadays, of course, I don't know. I guess I don't have really to mention or to that. Of course, the Milan Design Week is the biggest in the world, apparently, and it's the most joined worldwide, and so on. So we started from the Italian scenario again. A lot of companies making a lot of products, many products, and related to designs. And of course, within these companies, we have the internal designers, which are really mostly dealing with the inner production, and also you have external studios. And again, this design tradition of architects become designers, and then that can become again collaborating with companies to develop products and collections from them. But of course, this is really changing. On the right, again, the graphic of the presentation is really easy going. Please take it as it is. Really simple. Pretty ugly, I would say, but don't get bothered by that. On the right, we have one of the examples of the old school, as you can see. Also, let's say, external design studios that were actually dealing with companies like my family companies was doing. And of course, they were like giving heavy hair collections, proposals, and again, we were developing together internally. And that's how it works. It worked, or is still working for a lot of companies. But of course, this scenario changed. And again, it's really about how to make this scenario, let's say, how to see this scenario changing along the years. And how, again, the role of external designers dealing with companies and the studio and the design studios went really, let's say, disappearing along the years. This is given mainly simply because of the well, many reasons, of course, and of course, market-wise, is the market is surely the first reason. I mean, the most, let's say, clear, and it goes really with the crisis of industry along the years. So seeing companies having changed the market, having way less funding to invest into hiring designers from external studios, or even having them as been for my family companies, having dealing with just one single design company designing every year's collection. So private, I mean, two companies, I mean, a studio and a company, so two entities collaborating together. And from the point of view of the companies, it's not always easy, again, not always easy, but especially, and I will say, which I'm not directly blaming any specific institutions, but most this design culture in terms of education really managed to, let's say, create a lot of designers. I mean, I can see a lot of competitions, and very good designers nowadays are really, let's say, struggling now to actually make themselves available in the collaborations with companies. With this, I mean that there are a lot of designers and only very few companies able to, to collaborate with them, willing to collaborate with them. So something that I had the chance to experience myself, which I kept collaborating with companies, realizing products and so on, is that if they are not going to choose you as a designer because they like your proposal, they're going to only choose you because maybe you have a name and you can actually become part of the marketing plan. So you kind of able to bounce back the marketing message through your channels, of course. And we all know how nowadays is very, let's say, popular to pay designers or crafters or artisans or artists just with popularity, as if it is sort of a currency in nowadays world. And this is what companies started doing as well. But proposing, for example, the very renowned and very common, I'll find the word in English, which is a royalties system. I mean, nowadays, a designer can get up to maximum 6 or 5% of royalties on a product. It means that if you design a product, you have to do all the work for free to produce proposals, more than one, usually many. Tackle the right company that you think that it will be suitable for your proposals, or even just applying to calls, which is or to public calls or briefs, which is a very interesting way to, again, I don't want to use this word, but a bit of a exploit these poor designers in a sense. If you're lucky, you get in, you don't get paid for your work, you get paid back with royalties. And again, that's how it commonly works here in Italy. And I can tell this from my own experience and from all the colleagues, let's say, all the people that are now in the design field, trying to freelance and again, trying to collaborate with companies. And this doesn't allow you to go on. As a studio, as a professional, it just doesn't work. It just not, unless you really, and we will see a couple of examples actually of very, very, very good designers that managed to go through, let's say, being accepted or like being even called by companies. This happened also to me a few years ago, to get called by a few companies. But again, you do your proposals, you work for free. Sometimes, most of the times, they ask you also to do the technical side of it. So you have to design, you have to give them proper how to say, files with all measurements and all the specs of what you are proposing, not just a concept, which is very different. And then you get paid by royalties. Means that if your product is successful, it's going to probably take at least 6 months to 1 year anyway to get on the market and to get enough, let's say, enough product being sold to get your percentage back. And this is happen, and usually contracts are, companies are giving you the chance, let's say, to being paid back twice a year. So for every, let's say 5% of the revenues coming from the product or the collection, all the products you design, are going to be paid to you twice a year. This is not sustainable. This is not economically sustainable for a single entity designer or from a design studio. And that's how it works, mainly in Italy. I mean, unless again you manage to, unless you're an old school designer, so you're old enough to have the chance, having had the chance to work through the, let's say, one of the good period. I'm not talking about the golden areas which were happening among the 80s and the 90s, but at least before the mainly before the economical crisis of the 2007. That's where I really had the chance also seeing it from inside the company, from where I grew up, seeing designers changing their perspective. So the whole market changed. And so again, the work of designers being it like one of the last, let's say, pieces of the puzzle along the whole picture being affected undoubtedly from, of course, the market. The market, let's say, crisis again, which is very, how to say, not very specific as as an explanation. I mean, as a word, crisis. Surely designers that wanted to keep doing designers, they didn't want to join bigger studios, or they wanted still to be independent, had to change the way to work. That's what I had the chance to see from my point of view, and again from the point of view of many. And again, we can see that there sort of a transition happened. And we can see transition a bit, let's say, from both ways. They're not only in one way. And I can show you a few examples shortly of what I had the chance to see of designers mainly stopping trying to sending proposals to companies, so working for free and sending proposals, waiting for company from looking from above and saying, maybe you're good, maybe I'm gonna choose you, I'm gonna pay you twice a year, starting from 6 months. So and designers that really wanted to keep doing and designing products, stuff, items, artifacts, however you want to call them, they started going through basically from staying behind the desk to go into basically a lab, let's say, pretty much workshop. And so the first transition was that I was describing is about shifting from product design to craft, and we got many actually examples, and I can show you also I thought there was not really the point of placing them in my presentation, because I can call them like, I collected something like probably 15-20 examples, and we can see them through their website. It's even easier. So I can end my presentation, I can end my PowerPoint presentation, and we can see the websites. But at this point, I'd like to stop, and I didn't see the chat, but I'll be happy to open a bit of the discussion. So if you think that what I said is, if you saw anything like that, if you agree, if you don't agree. So let's do it first, let's say 10 minutes, I don't know, conversation, then we can continue with the examples and so on. What do you think, Cynthia?
That sounds great, Luca. Yeah, thank you so much. Do you want to stop sharing your screen? We do have some comments in the chat and questions. So Andrea Saye asked, when you say companies, do you work with mills or designers directly?
With meals, sorry, I'm checking the meeting chat.
Yeah, it's the first question there. When you say companies, do you work with mills or with designers directly?
What meals mean? That's a question.
Oh, yeah. So
I
mean, more generally, are you working with factories? Are you working with designers? Are you working with large distributors of materials, or are you working with designers? And perhaps, when you go into the case studies, you'll be showing us, but I don't know, Andrea, if the question is still applicable. Go ahead.
I mean, I think I noticed that you do work more with objects. So it's more rather than fabrics. I guess that was the question. I mean, I did see that you're working with some leather. But yeah, I guess the question was if you worked with like fabrics or designers, but then afterwards I saw that you were talking about collaborations. that you worked together with both the company and the people doing the materials. Is that correct? That's what I understood.
Absolutely correct. Actually, both. But in my case, specifically, my case is what I show was about my research. So my research is about materials, and so definitely it's about also to get in contact with companies able to process and to technically make materials instead, and then eventually going through contacting companies such as design firms.
Okay.
That's what I mean with companies.
Okay.
Good
Got it.
question. I had to probably specify better. Absolutely. So design firms that can eventually use those materials. But apart from my research, I was generally referring to designers, again, design studios or design practitioners, design freelance designers willing to submit their proposals to design firms that are eventually able to produce them through their suppliers, which are usually our mills, which again, it's a word that which I know was not familiar, but factories.
Okay.
Let's say.
Oh, mills is usually it's fabric factories.
Oh, okay,
mills is like the word used. Yeah.
But in the case of product designs, and also as you mentioned, that in the world of, let's say, but we're not talking about fashion items, which is quite different, of course, which I'm not familiar with, for example. But if we're talking about, for example, rugs, that's, or maybe something, well, rugs, which are, I guess, in between. So there are design products, but they are related to, I guess, the world of fabrics. Yes, there are rugs companies, the rugs themselves. As far, I mean, after my experience, there are probably only a bunch of producers left in Italy. Most of them are really let's say externalized. I mean, like India mainly, or nowadays even Eastern Europe. So I'm not really familiar with this sort of items. So I hope that I replied to the questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and Camila was asking, is wheat straw or other types of straw considered a good material for upcycling? Have you worked with wheat straw?
Not directly, but I saw few case studies working with that, actually. As considered strong good materials for the upcycling. Yeah, definitely they are. I mean, there is a big topic in the world of fillers, polymer fillers, and wheat straw, as long as they are considerable, I mean, waste, and which is a huge, it's an open topic. What is waste, what is not waste, obviously, but as long as for example, just to give an example of let's say or how this work, and to consider at least what are the parameters, which is again are still under discussion about what can be considered waste, and so good material, or and again, what do you mean with good materials? I mean that it can be usable easily or should not be considered waste. It's, yeah, but for example, there are some waste that are still used for human consumption, for example, or even used to extract nutrients for human consumption, while others are used for animal feeding. And as long as they are used for animal feeding, such as I show, is like potato peels. It really depends if there is an overproduction. If part of it it's used to produce energy, as long as if it burns, and so CO2 is released. So it's better to trap the CO2 into materials and then into products. So we can consider it, let's say, a good waste to be upcycled. Those are very, very roughly some of the parameters to be taken in account to encounter good or bad materials to be upcycled or not. With straw in particular, I saw polymer fillers using wheat straw and many other, let's say fibers coming from the agriculture waste. For example, rice husks, for example, or wheat straw used in limestone as a filler to better improve the insulating properties. So all the fibrous parts into limestone are welcomed in the world of architecture, for example. There are a few case studies of them.
Thank you. Yeah, Camila says grazie. I'm sick and have no voice. I hope you feel better, Camila. And Sanya put a link in the chat, IKEA rice straw collection. So I encourage everyone to click on that, or if you're watching the recording, you can search for that in your browser. And then another comment I made in the chat, absolutely what you described, this model of designers with companies get a percentage only after sales. I would agree is exploitative. So I was curious by your use of the word collaborate. It's something that we have in our studies in the Deed Lab, noticed that a lot of brands claim collaboration with the artisan that they employ. And how do we establish collaboration versus workers? How is that model of the designer with the company collaborative, and how much is it simply the company sourcing from designers, sourcing more things to sell or to market? Is that really collaboration?
So co-labor, I mean, working together.
Co-labor, yes.
Yes, literally. I mean, but not really. It's really about how to say. It depends, of course, about the theme of the company and how. Again, here communications. It's really a very heavy factor into the. How to say the word in English. I mean, it's a bait. It's the bait for company that company used to attract designers. And I mean, I'm getting older. I'm probably in another direction at the moment, but at 36 years, which is my age, I'm really getting. I mean, already got tired of like having these as a proposed outcome after like having royalties to collaborate with companies, which is it's very easy for a company to receive like thousands or thousands, some of them the good one, tens of thousands of proposals of young or not young designers of concepts, and some of them are really briefly done. Of course, you try to put as less effort as possible into these proposals in order to, okay, I've done this nice sketch, sounds smart, it looks smart, let's send it by email. And of course, you don't get any insurance of how the copyright of the proposal is treated. You just literally blindly walking against something that is going to bump on you, but if it is soft, it's good. if it doesn't, it is not, you just try to do a few more steps into having something done by a company. That's the prestigious outcome, which nowadays, I mean, after my experience, especially after a couple of years in research, in design research, I can see how this is so badly impactful for a few reasons. And maybe we can see it later along the presentation. There were a couple of books which I really had the chance to pick up along these months of waiting until having this conversation. One of them is published only in Italian, unfortunately, even though the writer is French. I don't know why, but I can. It's a mystery of editors, but maybe if there's anyone, but we'll probably briefly see it later.
Okay.
Maybe there's another factor actually, which actually was one of these we discussed in person, Cynthia, which is the cultural cultural factor. And I'm using this word in a very vague way because I don't have any background in anthropology and so on. So with this, I mean, of course, the design culture, which is specifically, it's of course worldwide, but in Italy, we have something a bit different. So if I'm Italian, I'm a designer, how design is taught to me through institutions. That's probably what makes a difference. How I can see, how I'm trained, educated to see myself in the future as a design practitioner. That's what really changes. And behind that, there is the, let's say, you can say, the consumeristic side of it. So the design culture that lies within products that are iconic, of course, and are part of the, let's say, national culture. I'm not briefly mentioning whatever, Vespa, very, very, how to say, very common objects that are kind of seeing you thinking that one day, or even your family members, even your what is nowadays your grandfather was probably thinking to how to say, achieving buying one of them. So let's say we've been educated not only inside the institution but also in our family by people who are actually living the economical boom. We call it the economical miracle because, of course, after the Second World War, this country was literally, yeah, dust and ashes, let's say. But after that, something happened. We can. We all know what happened. You know, the Marshall Plan and all the, of course, but again, this is part of the general culture, and it goes through the generations, and so you can see this consumption, this way of being, and there are amazing authors and philosophers. Of course, we're talking about Pier Paolo Pasolini, which is probably the most renowned one. Very interesting, let's say, even dark story behind his figure. But what we can say is that one of the citations that I can do is very famous. I keep doing it every time I have the good occasion to do it. But it was basically saying that the consumerism was really the only thing that managed to make every Italian citizen, let's say, the same. So to literally cancel every sort of, let's say, singular characteristics that were typical of being human of the Italians. Not even fashions made consumerism did it. So there's really a sense of agency and identity from that point of view really lead to also companies and to make the industrial tissue to grow very, let's say, yeah, very well. What to say? Okay, let's stick with the presentation. I'll try to give you a few examples, but again, we can pick them up from young design studios, which really, again, stop seeing themselves behind the desk and started probably cover themselves in dust, as you can see these guys on the right side of the screen. Which, for example, is Tip Studio. It's a couple of in the life and also work-wise. That's what they tell about themselves, at least. And they managed to work with materials in different ways. And materials are really at the center of these of the narrative as well. So basically, I interviewed them because I was really interested in the beginning of understanding how they were working with materials. And suddenly something else came out, of course, sharing the same, I'm a bit older than them, but sharing the same perspective of having a chance to trying to collaborate with companies, feeling exploited, saying that, well, no, I'm going to make things by myself. And so they managed to open up their own workshop. They started working with, well, as I was suggesting, we can go just on the website. It's way easier to, instead of just taking images on a presentation. It's way easier. Let's say here we are. Okay, let's open Tip Studio. Hope it doesn't bother you. please, if it is too frenetic, to stop me, or can you see my
No, it's
screen,
great.
please?
It's great. Go ahead. We don't see your screen right now.
Ah, okay. So you don't see the website then?
We're not seeing your website. No, we're not
Alright,
seeing the
no,
screen with the
web-
website.
Okay. Once again, sorry. All right, here we are. So this is the website. You can see that, right? So I'm scrolling down to.
Yes.
So Lotto was one of the first things that they made, for example, and I can see how they made it. I can totally relate with the practices of those designers. One of the methodologies and approaches that I'm following for my research is about DIY materials. So I can totally see them making their hands dirty. So this is something that the last generation of designers was probably maybe Ezio Manzini, maybe only a few of them, but were actually not even thinking about to do. So of course there was the prototyping, there was the factory visitings, but none of them, I mean, few of them were actually practically making things. As you can see in the, it is just ceramic and, no, sorry, this is concrete, but the molding, part of the manipulation, let's say, is done by hand. And as you can see how they try to keep as much as, and this is a design practice that reflects also a design, let's say, approach in making things craftable. With this, I mean that as far as I had the chance to discover during the interview, I mean, they never did specifically crafting with concrete or ceramics. So they reinvented themselves in order to and design items in order to be craftable, which is something interesting from their practice in general. And from these along the practices, so what designers that start approach design in these design the design market in this way can do. They basically make collection and started joining trade fairs, doing design exhibitions, and we will see along the presentations something which I call the portals, which are the game changers, which are actually galleries, design galleries. And in Italy, we have not many, but we have some of the most important actually worldwide. But anyway, the last time that I saw they work was during the last Milan design. No, sorry, it was 2 years ago. Sorry, in the design in the Alcova, maybe you hear about it. It's a place in Milan Design Week scenario, which is very, very well. There are amazing works there, and they had their own space, so they paid good money for that. They made their collection by themselves, and of course the problem with this approach is that you have to make your work sustainable by yourself. There is not a company covering production costs. And of course, this is a challenge. And to do this, and I was interested in mainly in this collection, it's called Secondo Fuoco, so second fire. And it means basically that those are the scraps, those are the waste coming from the steel industry. And they reuse them, they kind of remelt them in order to make this collection, which is completely made by them. They learn how to use it's called cera persa technique. So at the moment, what is not coming in my head is about like melting, let's say, melting metal techniques and so on. So this is just one of the examples. So they just stop getting into companies. They started making things themselves. But we don't have much time, right, Cynthia? We still have.
Yeah, we'll end at 30, so in about 12 minutes. I have a question about Tip Studio. Who are the customers here? Would you say luxury market? Are they collectors? Is this fine art? Is it product? Do they partner with architects or interior designers?
I was about to go there, but in the next part of the presentation. But yes, what maybe I can briefly share someone else, just not to stop you, not stopping only on this example. Well, yes. The point is that the channels, let's say, maybe this one is a nice one. Yes. The market channels are actually, well, as you mentioned already, yes, precisely, Annalisa Jacopetti. This is resin-based work, and she does it by herself. As another, well, sorry, gotcha. This was resin. No, it's glass. No, it's resin actually, as far as I know. After like having the chance to, at least maybe she moved to glass. Anyway, so yes, the market channel for these kind of designers are galleries mainly. They join to trade fairs, so interior designers, as you mentioned, direct selling, which is not the easiest one, honestly. Some of them have their own shop in their websites, but not really. That's not the problem. Mainly the galleries, as far as I had a chance to know, to discover, let's say, on the process of knowing them. Yes, that's a very nice one as well. Morgan Basel. She's a ceramist, for example. Deborah Mirabelli. But she didn't start as a ceramist. She's a former industrial designer. So maybe some other projects. Yes. Sorry, I'm clicking, but it doesn't come out. I'm sure why. Sorry about that. But it's possible to see it. I mean, and the point is that nowadays galleries are kind of doing the same as companies. I mean, it's a complex relations can be established between designers, and so some of them they're asking to give them product for free, obviously, even, and that it's kind of how the gallery works. Of course, you give them products, they stay on for certain periods, they work on the communication, attract buyers, and so on, and that's fine. But some of them ask you to pay to be exhibited, and that's a threshold which goes back to, again, having the work of designers, having her to make themselves. That's a very nice one as well. She's into weaving and making chairs as well, but not only. But again, not nodo, which means not. But she's an industrial designer. She's been formed as trained as an industrial designer too. But going back to the presentation quickly, what we can see is that galleries again are becoming kind of another barrier in a sense, because we let's say this transition gradually happened from probably more than 10 years, as far as I had the chance to see, at least in Italy. So there are many designers nowadays that are into crafting. There are platforms only for designers that are crafters, and so there's a certain threshold you have to go above, and this is okay. This means that, let's say, there's a quality research, and what galleries are usually good to do is to actually do scouting, so get mainly younger unknown designers and so on. This is exciting, but again, there are some sort of reasons why this doesn't mean to do, let's say, what I can see is that in the end, the market, galleries and so on, are mainly related to high-end customers. And some of the designers, which have different opinions about it, are kind of starting to think about what they want to achieve, what they want to do with their design. So this part of practitioners are questioning themselves, willing to be part of the high-end market only for a few people, and so on. quickly, I'll show you just a couple of examples of designers that started as a crafter, such as Giacomo Moore, that was presenting products like that, being called by companies such as Acerbis. These are very high-end, and they asked him to design this collection, and other companies, or Giacomo Poletti is a pretty young one. On the left, you can see how he was crafting his own products, and he's been called by Floss, which is one of the most ancient, let's say, companies dealing with designers. And again, what I was meaning with portals are actually galleries. I guess everyone knows this nice lady on the right, Onilufar, which is in Italy and also in Los Angeles. Again, scouting designers and so on. Camp Design Gallery, another one in Milan, which is quite, let's say, important, let's say. But again, there are a couple of reasons why designers are nowadays even questioning the question of being crafters. Because of course, you kind of look at the industry of something or some entities making, let's say, of course, standardized products, or even products that were actually able to cost less, being used by this for many reasons, of course, so many reasons, and some of them are not politically correct. For example, producing abroad and so on. But having a product that is widely distributed and being able to be used by anyone, let's say, enjoyed by anyone. While in the bespoke, of course, is an high-end market. Only few can afford it. So you have to, of course, you have to make yourself economically sustainable, not only staying behind your desk, but you have to have a proper lab, a proper workshop, paying materials costs and hours and of production and so on. You, of course, have to raise your prices. And again, you only targeting that specific, also through your channel or distribution channels, as we said, picturing that specific target of market, which is again is high-end, and the rest, and also another reason which I had the chance to, and I'm talking to let's say perceive through few of the interviews, or just having talking and being part, a bit less now, but part of the design community of, in Italy, is the sustainability part. I mean, including me, which is also part of my research, which is probably more into that transition, let's say, to sustainability, not into, we are scared of producing anything. Everyone can perceive how putting another product on the market is something that you're gonna sleep fine tonight, but something inside you, let's say, remains a little, let's say, a little rocking into the shoes, stays there and reminds you that you shouldn't have done it. I mean, why? And those are the main, let's say, reasons also why designers are trying to move in other places, out of the product design, even out of the crafting. And that's why my research, let's say, locates such as into the transitions, at least to not stop production, because you can't, but help the transition in a more sustainable, possibilities and scenarios. This is a very famous book. It's the third volume. Catherine Rossi, she knows the Italian scenario. She was based in Italy, so, and she's partially Italian, so she knows pretty well how crafting and industry are difficult to distinguish. And yeah, nothing else to say. It's the third volume. Another one, which is unfortunately again is published only in Italian, is called Contro l'oggetto, so against the object. As you can see, is really about engaging the discussion of how designers are dealing with producing, again, working within the logic of consumerism, mainly. So it's something worth it to, yeah, maybe an English version will come out, I guess, pretty soon. But and I think there are nothing much to say apart maybe a couple of examples of parachuters as as Cynthia might like to call them, so designers that parachute themselves into crafting communities and designed collections being manufactured by, let's say, artisans that have their own techniques, their own materials, specifically coming from Sicily in this case. Yeah, pretty much that. And also others from Venice, from Murano glass, maybe you hear about it then. Among them, we have Luca Nicchetto and Elena Salmistraro, which are big names in the world of design, worldwide, but mainly in Italy. And they basically went to these artisans and just they design new collections. And but this is something that is, but I would like to say that is something that is very welcomed in the Italian scenarios, because again, when you were mentioning meals, that's in a sense part of the meals. I mean, the producers in Italy are artisans that produce for other companies, do what they have to do, the process, part of the process of making new products. And that being said, I thank you for your time, and sorry for being a bit late.
No worries, Luca. I mean, if you have time, I'm happy to stay on for 15 minutes or so and continue the dialogue. And if people have to leave, we totally get it. We're at the hour. But thank you so much, Luca. A lot of food for thought. Would love to have a part 2 starting with the parachuters. And I really appreciate how you picked up and played with the language there. I'm also going to leave today's session thinking about co-labor. It's embedded in collaborate. That's really interesting. Yeah. So yeah, you know, as you all know, the core of our work in the Deed Lab has been indigenous and traditional artisans. With my colleague Ibarra Wadud, we started a recent project with the community of quilt makers in Gee's Bend, Alabama. And here in Luca's presentation, I think there are many models that I am left wondering, how would we, does it apply to the context of indigenous traditional artisans in emerging economies? What is that historical context around development, let's say? I'm also left wondering about the complicity of institutions, design schools like ours here at Parsons. How are we complicit in continuing to graduate people who are making more things? I appreciate your reflection there on the hesitation that many designers don't want to put more things into the world, because then we feel evil and cannot sleep at night. So thank you so much, Luca, for joining us. I'll open it up for questions, comments. You can raise your hand or you can type it in the chat as you prefer. Sanya.
Hi, Luca. I've also studied in Italy for a year, so it was like a flashback of memories for me, coming from the furniture background as well. So a friend of mine had an incident with the company, like he was interning with a company in the furniture industry, where he designed a product, but it was signed in another designer's name, like who was more renowned, and the company would, end up making more money out of his name rather than a budding designer. Have you had any instances that you came across in your research so far? I mean, I wouldn't name the company and the designer, obviously, but yes, have you seen instances?
I'm about to say, nothing makes me surprised anymore. I mean, yeah, I'm not really surprised at all. Not at all. I mean, what to say? So it was working for this furniture company, but they were collaborating with external designers, and the external designers ended up putting their signature on the collection, but it was designed by the intern inside.
Yes.
Well, I can say that happened to me too, but I mean, but I was working for my family company, so I couldn't. There was nothing to complain about, obviously. But yeah, well, there's a mutual. I mean, I don't know. It's again, it's really varies, but there's a mutual collaboration usually, and I'm not surprised by company having had to or having like they have to name someone else from outside the company as a design. I mean, at least in the Italian culture, which is very worldwide. Does it work worldwide? I mean, but yes, I'm not surprised. What to say? I don't have anything else to add. But it's. I mean, I've seen people sending proposals via email, via call, and having just being produced without having their name at all. Yeah, so and that happened multiple times actually, because of course we all know that the copyright, at least for designers, at least for you have to change one detail, and you're not entitled to get any. And of course, if you want to pursue that sort of going for the legal ways, at least in Italy, it's like an awful thing. You rather, yeah, do nothing. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
Farzana?
Yes. Hi, Luca. Thank you so much for this presentation. It was really, yeah, and an eye-opening and, you know, a different point of view from Italy. And yeah, thank you for sharing your experience. I was wondering, when you were talking about the parachuting of the designers and collaborating with the artisans, so did you say that the artisans, they don't oppose to this type of collaborations, or would you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking this question. I really wanted to better specify. Well, let's allow me to be a bit more clear about what I mean with artisans. It's really, again, it's a very blurred line between, I mean, at least in Italy. So we got crafting traditions that do specific products in relation to the regional traditions, for example, and we are very rich in terms of this. Every region have multiple productions done by specific cities, even if they have, of course, an historical background, especially that was promoted also from the Renaissance. So you can imagine like ceramics from one specific small city is there like 40 kilometers far. There's another one having having another one. So and from this point of view, it really depends how the market opens up for them. It's pretty clear. So as long as they are not competing with let's say, let's call them historically inspired products, but they having the chance to have again to collaborate, but actually to work together with designers that design differently or inspired pieces, making those artisans working at them, so making them let's say being paid or having them again. This is very welcome actually. And we can say that from these, another, let's say, scale into the, then not a scale, another step into the artisan world, which is again a bit of in between, are small producers that do productions for other companies, but with specific techniques. With I mean, for example, woodworkers. That are not maybe related to a specific identity in a specific regional or and so on, and they already kind of work with companies or they are suppliers of companies, but they want to stay as much as small as possible, telling to everyone that they're doing things by hand, for example, but they can make furniture or sculptures in the same production line. So it's probably I won't say unique, but it's kind of a rare scenario. And then there are like suppliers which are partially industrialized, which can produce any sort of let's say perform any sort of processes for the industries or for the design firms, which call them as suppliers. So let's say that we have these, I'm really badly generalizing, but these three categories of crafters, no, sorry, artisans, sorry, going up from the very small one, very really related to identity or to a specific traditions, till the going up to the industrialized one. And there's a very, let's say, continuum. There's not a specific category. So.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Maybe what I could do, I could probably send to Cynthia a couple of examples which I have to better, let's say, focalize better to that designers that design. Well, for example, Murano is the last one that I show. Murano is probably you know already. It's a small island close to Venice. They have this extremely ancient tradition of making glass, and every designer, maybe not including me, and I never really wanted to to go there, but managed to do their own collection or bespoke collections, or at least them being called by associations, thinking about how this can work. So there are associations dealing with the small artisans in the workshops, helping them to get clients. So you can see how this is completely different. So having the specific, because they are related to the specific technique. So it's an identity, it's a signature, let's say. So.
Lashana, you had your hand raised?
I did. Thank you so much, Luca and Cynthia, for this session. It's been very enlightening. I too had a question on parachuters. I'm curious, I understand the designers sort of parachute in on the artisans. Who owns that material or that design after it's created? Are the artisans then able to recreate or, redesign something comparable? Or is there like an exclusivity if they work with this particular parachuter company? How does that work exactly? Thank you in advance.
You're welcome. Thanks to you for the questions and for joining. I will say that it's quite an old tradition. So those relations have been regulated quite smoothly along the years. Let's say. I mean, with this, I mean that usually it works that I'm a designer. I wanna well. Let's take it from the point of view of designers. But again, in this case, I guess you're meaning that typology of artisans or crafters, which are related to specific techniques and identities related to specific, usually geographical areas, if that's what you mean. Otherwise, again, artisans can be, let's say, crafters. I mean, people that work with their hands with specific techniques, but they are quite open to collaborate and to work on every sort of projects, becoming suppliers of bigger industries or design firms and so on. So in the end, it is the designer or the design firm who owns the concept, because they pay hourly their work. So they use their technique, their knowledge, and they get paid for that. And usually the design firms or the designer which want to present their own bespoke, his or her own bespoke collection, are more than happy to claim and say everywhere this has been done through these old technique, let's say technique, or through these the work of these specific artisans. It's a value. It's a value that, in a sense, it also justifies higher prices. It's an high-end product in the end.
I'll chime in, Lashana. I'll drop an article in the chat. This organization in Guatemala lawyered up to sue 64,000 Etsy products for copyright infringement. So appropriating Mayan designs. We have had here with us in the Deed Lab the founder, Monica Moisen of Cultural Intellectual Property Rights Initiative. I would say she's a leader in this space around how do we generate the intellectual property frameworks within particular countries' legal frameworks for artisans to be able to own their IP. And in our work in the Deed Lab, I would say that we've observed most brands handing off designs to artisans, have the artisans sign or at least agree to not sharing the designs. Often the artisans are working on a product that is for the next season's collection, and the brand wants to make sure that the design doesn't get out into the world. It's like a big topic across artisan brands and companies. And in a course I taught, Artisan Futures, Megan, who's here, was in that course. One of the student projects there was a portfolio for artisans. So there's also a big problem we've seen in the artisan sector where artisans are told they can't show people the products they've worked on, or maybe it's as basic as the brand doesn't give them a photo of the final product, and they don't have the resources necessarily to find it or to print out the photo. So one of the student projects was how could we create a modular portfolio system for artisans to have their own portfolios of work of things they've done that they can then show others, and also for empowerment and purposes of pride. And then Megan's team actually worked on a project that was really centering artisans as designers and bringing in a workshop focused on creativity, so that we're not defaulting to these models of externalization of design handed off to the artisan who then just produces it, but in fact really celebrating the artisan's creativity and workshopping it with them, because part of the issue that we've seen in the Deed Lab is these models of the externalization of design also starts to stunt the creativity. What I say to students here at Parsons, it's as if you walked into a painting class and you were given a canvas with a pre-printed outline with the numbers. All the ones are blue and all the reds are green. So the paint by numbers model. That's what we see in the artisan sector when it comes to that designer artisan quote unquote collaboration. So great question, Lashana. Thank you so much. So we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you again, Luca. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope your evening is good. And thank you all for joining us today or for tuning into the recording, and look forward to seeing you at a future La Hora. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's been really enjoyable. And yeah.
Thank you, Luca.
More than welcome.